Hey, it's NPR's Book of the Day. I'm Andrew Limbong. You know, at NPR, we pride ourselves on bringing you books written from different perspectives, different walks of life, writers from different cultures, races, and countries, you name it. And what's interesting to me is that there are always some common threads, some shared universal questions that we're all grappling with. Today on the show, that question is, what's the deal with my dad? Julian Brave NoiseCat's new book, We Survived the Night, is an artfully written nonfiction book that blends journalism with mythology, history, and memoir. And in this interview with NPR's Michel Martin, it's clear he comes with a unique perspective. And yet, if you boil this book down to its core essence, it's about that central question, which is something we can all relate to. That's coming up.
This message comes from NPR sponsor Sierra. Ever found yourself waiting on hold, losing patience, and then hanging up? It's frustrating and all too common. That's why there's Sierra, the AI platform that makes talking to businesses easy. No stock answers, no hold music, just real solutions, fast. Visit Sierra.ai to learn more.
This message comes from Bombas. You need better socks and slippers and underwear because you should love what you wear every day. One purchased equals one donated. Go to bombas.com/NPR and use code NPR for 20% off.
In August 1959, a watchman at a Catholic-run Indian boarding school in British Columbia, Canada, heard a noise, a cry really, coming from the incinerator. It was a newborn baby left in an ice cream carton. It was author and filmmaker Julian Brave NoiseCat's father, Ed. Ed's beginning was unusual, but what followed was not. Brave NoiseCat weaves his father's story into the larger canvas of the Native experience in a new book titled We Survived the Night. And he's with us now to tell us more about it. Julian Brave NoiseCat, thank you so much for talking with us.
Thank you so much for having me on the public airwaves.
So let's start with the name of your book. There's a meaning to it.
Yeah, so We Survived the Night, the title of my book, is derived from the traditional way to give the morning greeting in Secwepemchin. That's my family's language, my indigenous language. We say Chochwinuk, which doesn't actually translate to good morning. It means you survived the night.
You write about Indian names in your book, and you say names come with responsibilities. So would you tell us about yours?
My dad was found in the trash incinerator at St. Joseph's Mission, the Indian residential school that my family was sent to unlearn our Indian ways. And according to the news article where the night watchman who found him is quoted, his cries for life sounded like the noise of a cat. You know, my last name is NoiseCat, which is especially kind of mind-blowing to me because our last name NoiseCat actually did not originally mean NoiseCat. That was just the missionaries wrote down the name wrong, essentially. It was originally NoiseCat. That was our ancestral Salish name. But then, I don't know, I mean, something about Indians and names, right? The name kind of found its own meaning and story, and it became one of survival.
What a start to life. Your father barely surviving his birth had to have affected his life. And then, in turn, it had to have affected your life, which is kind of the core of the book. Tell us what you'd like to tell us about that.
Well, my dad was the first generation of kids on the Cannon Lake Indian Reserve that were not taken away to St. Joseph's Mission, the Indian residential school that my grandmother was sent away to. And when you deprive a people, an entire race, of the right to parent their children, eventually you break down the fundamental structures of the family system. You know, my dad was sort of always running from his own demons, his past. And eventually he left both me and my little sister behind. And so the book really is about trying to understand him and our story and what it is to be Native, because my connection to that, you know, my community was broken when I was a young boy.
You know, you co-directed the Oscar-nominated documentary film called Sugarcane. It follows you and your father's reckoning alongside the story of an investigation that unearthed the remains of more than 200 children at a former Indian residential school in Canada. Why was it important for you to document these difficult conversations?
You know, my father did not know about the circumstances of his own birth and discovery in the trash incinerator until I directed Sugarcane and until he watched it in the film itself. So I think that part of what I was trying to communicate with that film was why this silence, why this lack of knowledge about what happened to Native people exists in the broader world in the way that that was in many ways internalized by our own communities and our own people. And then on the flip side of that, as a storyteller, I'm also thinking very purposefully about what traditions were nearly wiped out by those schools, and that I, as a Native storyteller, have a responsibility to bring back to life on the page.
We're talking about this as if it's kind of a linear narrative, but that isn't how the book unfolds. It's actually remarkably rich and multi-layered. You kind of lace it with Native mythology, if I can use that term, about the coyote in particular. Could you read a little bit, please?
Yeah. My people don't tell the coyote stories really anymore. And so, as I was working on the book, I was also reading these old coyote stories that were gathered up in ethnographic texts 100+ years ago. And I just started to notice that there were so many parallels between our trickster ancestor, this guy called Coyote, who was sent to the earth by the creator to set things in order, and who was a trickster. So he did a lot of good, but he also messed a lot of stuff up. And, my own father, with whom I have loving but complex backstory. So here I guess I'll read a story about how our people narrated the arrival of the first white man in our territory as the return of the trickster coyote. This is from a chapter called The Drifters. The most common account held that Coyote would reappear in the end times. When things came full circle, the trickster who molded the world into its indigenous state would be there just to do whatever trickster blank needed to be done. Make something, like a sun, or break something, like the witch's fishing weir, or steal something, like goose eggs or a wife, or invent essential ergonomic functions, like the elbow, or live a life full of damn good stories, because how the world ends is just as important as how it begins.
That's wonderful. Before I let you go, I don't want to erase your mom.
Yeah.
She has her own story.
She does.
Your mom is not a Native person.
Nope.
And the book is dedicated to her.
Yeah.
I'm wondering how you decided to make sure she had presence in the story.
The truth is that she raised me, so she was always going to have presence. And, even though she's non-native, she's an Irish Jewish New Yorker, and if you hear her talk, you'll hear it. She did things like after my father and her split, she would still take me to visit his family so that I could understand my culture and who I was. She even learned how to bead so that I could have my own powwow regalia to travel and dance.
Wow. So do you have a hope for this book, what it will do?
When we include Native people in the story, I think that we understand this place a bit differently. My people have always considered the coyote stories nonfiction, and I think that it's long past time that the social sciences actually take these ideas and these stories seriously, because there's a reason we told them for thousands and thousands of years. And you can't tell me right now that this is not a world that is still spun around by tricksters and their tricks.
Julian Brave NoiseCat is the author of We Survived the Night. Julian Brave NoiseCat, thank you so much for talking with us.
Cook's Gem, Michel, really loved the conversation.
Hey, Andrew here, host of NPR's Book of the Day podcast. And yeah, I love new books, but there's just something about rereading an old favorite. On our new limited series Books We've Loved, we're revisiting some classics, from Pride and Prejudice to Dune to everything in between, and talking about why they're worth reading today. Listen to NPR's Books We've Loved right on this podcast feed every Saturday on the NPR One app or wherever you get your podcasts.
This message comes from REI Co-op. Don't be surprised when you're this season's best gift giver. With REI's curated selection of outdoor gear, from top-rated running shoes to merino wool base layers, you don't have to guess. REI makes it easy to find the gear that gets them out there. It gets even easier with trusted advice and recommendations from REI's outdoor pros in over 190 stores. So when you gift them something they'll actually use, you won't be surprised, but they will. This season, give without guessing. Shop in-store or head to rei.com.
This message comes from Jerry. Many people overpay for car insurance because switching feels like too much hassle. That's why there's Jerry, your proactive insurance assistant. Jerry compares rates side by side from over 50 top insurers and helps you switch with ease. Jerry even tracks market rates and alerts you when it's best to shop. No spam calls or hidden fees. Drivers who save with Jerry could save over $1,300 a year. Switch with confidence. Download the Jerry app or visit jerry.ai/NPR today.